The little girl danced for the blind man on the corner. He wasn't really blind, and he wasn't poor either. The chalk had faded on the sidewalk. 8-year-old Zelda still found her perfect spot. She placed herself 3 feet from the old man who sat on his weathered blanket every Tuesday after school. Zelda would drop her backpack against the lamppost. Then she would begin her routine. Today, she wore her favorite yellow dress with tiny sunflowers. The dress made her feel like dancing even when she walked. The old man they called Mr. Cassius had been sitting on this corner of Maple Street for months. His graying beard was always neatly trimmed. His clothes were clean but worn. His guitar case lay open beside him with scattered coins. "Good afternoon, Mr. Cassius," Zelda called out. Her voice carried a musical lilt that made her mother smile. "I brought you something special today." From her backpack, she pulled out a peanut butter sandwich. It was wrapped in wax paper. She had made it herself, cutting off the crusts just the way her grandmother had taught her. Mr. Cassius's weathered hands reached out. He found the sandwich with practiced ease. "Thank you, little dancer," he said. His voice carried a warmth that seemed to come from deep within his chest. "Your kindness feeds more than just my body." Zelda giggled and began her dance. She started with simple steps, her arms swaying like branches in a gentle breeze. Mr. Cassius tilted his head, listening to the soft shuffle of her shoes against the concrete. His clouded eyes never seemed to follow her movements, but somehow he always knew exactly where she was. "Tell me about the colors today," he said, his fingers absently strumming his guitar. "The leaves are turning golden orange," Zelda said, spinning in a circle. "Like the sunset, but on trees. And there's a lady across the street with a purple coat. She's watching us through her window." Mr. Cassius paused his strumming. "Mrs. Cordelia always watches. She's been doing that for years." Zelda stopped dancing. "You know her? This is a small town, little one. Everyone knows everyone, even when they pretend not to." The autumn air carried the scent of burning leaves and distant wood smoke. Zelda continued her dance, her movements becoming more elaborate. She leaped and twirled, her yellow dress billowing around her like a flower in bloom. Other passers-by would slow their steps, some dropping coins into Mr. Cassius's guitar case while watching the little girl's performance. "Why do you sit here every day?" Zelda asked during a break in her routine. Mr. Cassius set down his guitar. "Sometimes we need to be exactly where we are supposed to be, even when we don't understand why." "Are you sad?" Zelda asked, her young voice filled with genuine concern. "Not when you're here, little dancer. Not when you're here." 3 blocks away, in a Victorian house painted sage green, Cordelia Whitmore watched from her second-floor window. She had been watching Mr. Cassius for 3 months now, ever since he first appeared on that corner. At 72, Cordelia had seen enough of life to recognize someone carrying a heavy burden. But she had never seen anyone who carried it with such dignity. Cordelia had been a nurse for 40 years before retiring. She knew how to read people, how to see past their exterior to the pain beneath. Mr. Cassius puzzled her. His clothes were too clean for someone truly homeless. His guitar was expensive, not the cheap instrument she would expect from a street musician. And his hands, those were not the hands of someone who had lived rough, but it was the way he interacted with the little girl that truly captured Cordelia's attention. There was something in his posture, in the careful way he listened to every word she spoke, that reminded her of someone. Someone from a long time ago. The next Tuesday, Cordelia made a decision. She put on her purple coat and walked down to the corner. Zelda was in the middle of her dance, her movements more confident now, more refined. Mr. Cassius was humming along to a melody that seemed to match her steps perfectly. "Excuse me," Cordelia said, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to being heard. "I'm Cordelia Whitmore. I live in the greenhouse up the street." Mr. Cassius looked up, his clouded eyes focusing in her general direction. Mrs. Whitmore. The retired nurse. Cordelia felt a chill run down her spine. How do you know that? Like I told young Zelda here, it's a small town. People talk. But Cordelia heard something else in his voice. A slight tremor, a catch that spoke of recognition. She studied his face more carefully, looking past the beard, past the weathered skin, past the clouded eyes. Zelda, dear, Cordelia said gently, would you mind getting us some hot chocolate from the cafe? Here's $5. Zelda looked between the two adults, sensing an undercurrent she didn't understand. But she took the money and skipped down the street, her yellow dress bright against the gray autumn afternoon. Now then, Cordelia said, settling onto the bench across from Mr. Cassius. Suppose you tell me who you really are. Mr. Cassius was quiet for a long moment. His fingers found the guitar strings, playing a soft melody that seemed to come from memory. I'm exactly who I appear to be, he said finally. A man who sits on corners and listens to little girls dance. No, Cordelia said firmly. You're someone else. Someone I think I knew a long time ago. The melody stopped. Mr. Cassius's hand stilled on the guitar strings. 43 years ago, Cordelia continued, I was a young nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. There was a car accident on a rainy November night. A family of 4. The parents didn't make it. There were 2 boys, twins, about 12 years old. One of them had injuries to his eyes. The other boy made me promise I would take care of his brother. Mr. Cassius's breath caught. Cordelia. The boy without the eye injuries was adopted quickly. The blind boy stayed in the hospital for months. I used to read to him. He had the most beautiful voice, always humming melodies. He said he was going to be a musician someday. Cordelia, please. The boy's name was Cassius Aldrich. He was adopted by a family in California. I never saw him again. She paused, studying his face. Until 3 months ago, when a man who looked remarkably like that boy started sitting on this corner. Mr. Cassius removed his dark glasses. His eyes were not clouded at all. They were clear, brown, and filled with tears. Hello, Cordelia, he said softly. I wondered if you would remember. Your eyes, she whispered. They're fine. Laser surgery, 10 years ago. Medical technology has come a long way since we were young. But why? Because I'm a coward, he said, his voice breaking. Because I came back to this town to find my brother, to find out what happened to him, and I discovered he died 15 years ago. Heart attack. He was 39 years old. Cordelia felt her own tears starting. Cassius, I'm so sorry. He became a teacher. Had a family. 2 daughters. I found his grave in the cemetery on the hill. I sat there for hours, trying to figure out how to tell him I was sorry. Sorry for not finding him sooner. Sorry for not keeping the promise I made that night in the hospital. What promise? That I would always find him. That we would always be together. That being apart was just temporary. Cassius wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I became a musician, just like I said I would. I've had a good life. I've traveled the world, made records, played in symphonies. But I never forgot the promise I made to my brother. So you came back. I came back, and I was too late. By 15 years. He gestured to the corner around them. So I started sitting here. I don't know why. Maybe I thought if I sat here long enough, I could figure out how to forgive myself. And then Zelda started dancing. Cassius smiled through his tears. And then Zelda started dancing. This little girl, so full of life and joy, and she saw the sad old man and decided to share her light with him. She didn't know I wasn't really blind. She didn't care that I was a stranger. She just saw someone who needed kindness. Cordelia reached across the space between them and took his hand. You know what your brother would say if he were here? What? He would say you kept your promise. You found him. You found his spirit in this little girl who dances for strangers. You found his kindness in your own heart when you sit here every day, letting people think you need their help when you're really the one giving them something precious. Zelda came bouncing back with 3 cups of hot chocolate, her cheeks flushed pink from the cold. She stopped short when she saw both adults crying. "Are you sad?" she asked, the same question she had asked Cassius weeks ago. "No, little dancer," Cassius said, his voice steady now. "We're not sad. We're grateful." "For what?" "For you. For your dancing. For the way you see the world and decide to make it more beautiful." Zelda beamed and handed them their hot chocolate. "Can I dance some more?" "Always," Cassius said. "Always dance." Over the following weeks, the corner on Maple Street became something different. Cordelia would join them most afternoons, bringing blankets and sometimes homemade cookies. Other neighbors began to stop by. Mrs. Chen from the flower shop would bring day-old roses. Marcus, the teenager who worked at the grocery store, would sit on his break and listen to Cassius play guitar. What had started as a little girl's innocent desire to bring joy to a lonely stranger had become something larger. A community gathering place. A reminder that kindness creates ripples, that small acts of love can transform not just individuals but entire neighborhoods. One evening, as the autumn light was fading to deep purple, Cassius made an announcement. "I have something to tell you all," he said, his voice carrying over the small crowd that had gathered. "I haven't been entirely truthful about who I am." Zelda stopped her dancing. Cordelia squeezed his hand encouragingly. "My name is Cassius Aldrich. I am not homeless. I am not poor. I am a musician, and I have spent the last 3 months sitting on this corner because I was lost. I was grieving. I was trying to find my way back to something I thought I had lost forever." He looked directly at Zelda. "And then this little girl started dancing for me. She didn't know I could see her. She didn't know I didn't need her sandwich. She just saw someone who seemed sad and decided to share her joy." "You can see me?" Zelda asked, her eyes wide. "I can see you perfectly. And you are the most beautiful dancer I have ever watched. But why did you pretend?" Cassius thought for a moment. "Sometimes we pretend to be one thing when we're really another. Sometimes we pretend to need help when we're really the ones who need to help. Sometimes we pretend to be lost when we're really exactly where we need to be." "I don't understand," Zelda said. "You will someday. But for now, just know that your dancing, your kindness, your light, it saved me. It brought me back to life." Cordelia wiped away fresh tears. "What will you do now?" "I'm going to stay," Cassius said. "I'm going to buy a house in this town. I'm going to keep making music. And if she'll have me, I'm going to give Zelda proper dance lessons." "Really?" Zelda squealed, bouncing on her toes. "Really? But only if you promise to keep dancing on this corner. The world needs more joy, little dancer. And you've got enough joy to share with everyone." As winter turned to spring, the corner on Maple Street became legendary in the small town. Cassius bought the house next to Cordelia's, and together they created a music and dance program for local children. Zelda became his star pupil, but she never stopped her Tuesday afternoon performances on the corner. The guitar case was retired, replaced by a small donation box with a sign that read, "For the community garden." The money went to buying plants and tools for a garden space behind the community center, where children could learn about growing things and neighbors could gather for outdoor concerts. Cassius never forgot his brother, but he learned to carry the memory differently. Instead of grief, he carried gratitude. Gratitude for the time they had together. Gratitude for the lessons learned from loss. Gratitude for the second chance at family that came in the form of a dancing 8-year-old and a watchful neighbor who remembered a scared boy from 40 years ago. On warm evenings, when the sun set golden over Maple Street, Cassius would sit on his porch and play guitar while Zelda danced on the sidewalk. Cordelia would watch from her window, no longer worried or puzzled, but peaceful in the knowledge that sometimes the best families are the ones we choose, and sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the simplest acts of kindness. The corner where it all began became a place of pilgrimage for visitors to the town. People would come to see the spot where a little girl's dancing had transformed an entire community. They would leave coins in the donation box, not because anyone needed them, but because they wanted to be part of the story. They wanted to contribute to the magic that happened when one person decides to share their light with another, and every Tuesday, without fail, Zelda would put on her yellow dress with the tiny sunflowers and dance for anyone who needed to see that the world was still full of wonder. She would dance for the elderly couple holding hands as they walked by. She would dance for the postal worker who always smiled and waved. She would dance for the teenagers who pretended not to care but always slowed down to watch. Most of all, she would dance for Cassius, who had taught her that sometimes the greatest gift we can give another person is the chance to be kind. That sometimes we serve others best by allowing them to serve us. That love takes many forms, and sometimes it looks like a little girl dancing on a corner for a man who could see her all along. In the end, none of them had been exactly who they appeared to be. Cassius was not a poor blind man. Cordelia was not just a nosy neighbor. Zelda was not just a dancing child. They were all broken people who had found each other at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right place, and discovered that healing comes not from fixing ourselves, but from loving others well enough to let them love us back. In a world that often feels divided and lonely, kindness is the bridge that connects us all. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, young or old, able-bodied or disabled. It doesn't matter if you're the one giving help or the one receiving it. What matters is that you show up, that you see the humanity in others, and that you're willing to share whatever light you have, even if it's just a 3-minute dance on a street corner, because sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything. Sometimes, a little girl's dance is exactly what a broken heart needs to remember how to beat again. And sometimes, the greatest gift we can give the world is the simple recognition that we all have something beautiful to offer, and we all deserve to be seen, valued, and loved exactly as we are.